Welcome to English Avenue Bookish. Today we have a very special story for you. A story of adventure, survival, and hope. My name is Adam Cole, and this is my story. I was born in a small town near the sea. My father was a fisherman, and my mother was a schoolteacher. I grew up watching the ocean every single day of my life. From a very young age, I loved the water. I loved the sound of the waves at night. I loved the smell of the salt in the air. The sea felt like home to me. My father wanted me to be a teacher like my mother. He said the sea was dangerous and unpredictable. He told me many stories of sailors who never came back home. But I could not listen to those warnings. My heart was always pulled toward the water. I wanted to sail to distant places and see the world beyond our small town. When I was 20 years old, I made a decision. I packed my bags and said goodbye to my family. My mother cried and held my face in her hands. She told me to always pray when things got hard. My father shook my hand firmly and said nothing. But when I turned to walk away, I saw his eyes. They were full of love and full of fear at the same time. I carried that look with me always. I found work on a large merchant ship called the Silver Wind. The captain was a strict man, but he was fair and he knew the sea very well. We sailed between islands carrying goods and food. The work was hard and the days were long. I learned how to read the stars at night. I learned how to feel the wind change direction. I learned that the ocean has its own language. For 3 years, I sailed on the Silver Wind. We visited many beautiful ports and islands. I met people from many different countries, and I heard many wonderful and strange stories. I saved my money carefully during those years. I wanted to one day have my own small boat. I wanted to be free to sail wherever I chose and to write about everything I had seen. Then one morning, everything changed forever. We were sailing south toward a group of islands when the skies suddenly turned a dark and angry gray. The captain ordered everyone to prepare for a storm. The storm came faster than anyone expected. The wind screamed through the ropes and sails. The waves rose up like tall, dark mountains around us. The whole ship shook violently from side to side. I held on to a thick rope near the front of the ship. I could see nothing around me except black water and white foam and the terrifying darkness of the sky. I prayed to God the way my mother had taught me. Then a massive wave struck the ship from the left side. The force of it threw me completely off the deck. I fell into the cold and roaring ocean below me. The water swallowed me like a hungry, dark mouth. I fought with everything I had to reach the surface. My lungs burned and my arms ached from the cold. Finally, my head came above the water and I gasped. I could see the ship, but it was already far away. I screamed for help, but no one could hear me. The rain and wind swallowed my voice completely. I grabbed onto a large piece of broken wood from the ship. I held onto it with both hands and I did not let go. I floated in the cold, dark ocean for many long hours. Sometimes I was awake and sometimes I was not. I thought about my mother and my father and my home. I told myself that I would not die in this cold water. When morning finally came, the storm had ended. The sky was pale and quiet and the sea was calm. I looked around me in every direction but saw only water. The ship was completely gone. My crew was gone. I was completely alone in the middle of the ocean. I had nothing except the piece of wood beneath me. My clothes were wet and heavy, and I was very cold. But I was alive, and I held on to that simple fact. I do not know how long I floated on that piece of wood. Time became very strange and difficult to measure. I drifted in and out of a strange, dark sleep. I dreamed of my mother's kitchen and warm bread. Then I felt something solid beneath my feet. I opened my eyes and saw sand. Beautiful, pale sand. I had drifted to the shore of a small island. I crawled out of the water and collapsed on the beach. I lay on the warm sand for a very long time. The sun was kind, and it slowly dried my clothes. I listened to the sound of birds somewhere in the trees. I was alive. I was on land, and that was enough. When I had the strength, I sat up and looked around. The island was small, but it was green and full of life. There were tall trees behind the beach and large rocks at the far end where white birds were resting. I had nothing with me except the clothes on my body. No food, no water, no tools, and no shelter. I knew that if I wanted to survive, I had to work. I had to use my mind in everything around me. The first thing I needed was fresh water. I remembered that streams usually flow toward the sea. I walked into the forest and listened carefully for the sound of moving water somewhere nearby. After about 30 minutes, I found a small stream. The water was clear and cold and absolutely beautiful. I put my face into it and drank deeply for a long time. I have never in my life tasted anything so good. Next, I needed to find something to eat. I found coconut trees near the edge of the forest. I knocked down several coconuts with a long stick and drank the sweet milk from inside them. That first night, I slept under a large tree. I covered myself with big flat leaves for warmth. I listened to the sounds of the island in the dark. There were insects and birds and the distant waves. I did not sleep well that first night at all. Every small sound made me sit up with fear. I thought about wild animals hiding in the darkness. I thought about my family wondering where I was. The next morning I began to work seriously. I needed a safer place to sleep than the open ground. I found a small cave in the rocks near the beach. It was dry inside and large enough for one person. I spent several days making this cave into a home. I collected large flat stones and made a low wall across the entrance to keep out any animals at night. I gathered dry leaves and grass to sleep on. I made a fire by striking two hard stones together. It took me many attempts and a great deal of patience. But eventually a small spark caught in the dry grass, and I had the most beautiful fire I had ever seen. That fire changed everything on the island for me. I could cook food and keep warm and feel less alone. The light from the fire in the dark cave felt like a small, brave heart beating against the darkness. I learned quickly what was safe to eat on the island. There were many kinds of fruit in the forest. I found mangoes and figs and a type of yellow berry that grew in large clusters near the stream. I caught fish in the shallow water near the rocks. I made a simple spear from a long, straight branch. I sharpened the end carefully with a sharp stone, and after much practice, I became a good fisherman. I also found wild plants with thick edible roots. I roasted them in the fire and they tasted surprisingly good. The island was generous with food if you were patient and willing to learn its patterns and its secrets. I started to keep a record of the days passing. Every morning I made a small mark on a flat stone near the entrance of my cave using a sharp rock. This helped me keep my mind organized and clear. In the evenings I sat by my fire and talked out loud. I know it sounds strange to talk when no one is there, but hearing my own voice helped me feel less alone. It kept my thinking clear and my spirit from breaking. I talked about my memories of home and my family. I talked about the places I had visited on the ship. I talked about what I would do when I was rescued. I talked about everything and anything at all. One day, while exploring the far side of the island, I made a discovery that fills me with great joy. I found an old broken box, half buried in the sand. It had been there for a very long time by the look of it. Inside the box, I found several very useful things. There was a small rusted knife that I cleaned carefully. There was a length of old rope that was still strong, and there was a small tin box with matches inside. The matches were wet and none of them worked at all, but the knife and the rope were incredibly valuable. With the knife, I could work 10 times faster than before. With the rope, I could build things I could not before. I used the rope to build a simple hanging bed in my cave. This kept me off the cold ground while I slept at night. I used the knife to make better tools and to prepare food. Those two simple things made my life much more comfortable. I began to explore every part of the island in detail. I found that the island was larger than I first thought. There was a high hill in the center with a good view from which I could see the entire ocean all around. I climbed this hill every morning to look for ships. I watched the horizon carefully for any sign of rescue. I saw nothing for many weeks except empty blue water and the occasional line of birds flying in the distance. One morning, I saw something I had not seen before. There was a dark shape floating slowly near the shore. My heart jumped wildly in my chest as I ran down the hill, but when I reached the water, it was only a large log. The disappointment was very heavy in my heart that day. I sat on the beach beside that useless log for a long time. I felt the loneliness of the island pressed down on me, like a heavy stone sitting on my chest and shoulders. But I did not allow myself to stay in that feeling. I remembered something my mother used to tell me often. She said that self-pity is a room with no windows or doors. You can choose to walk in, but you can also choose to leave. I got up off the beach and went back to my work. I decided to build a signal fire on top of the hill. I gathered dry wood every day and built a large pile. If I saw a ship, I would light this fire immediately. I also decided to build a better and stronger shelter. The cave was good, but I wanted something I had made myself. I cut strong branches from the trees with my knife, and I built a small house at the edge of the forest. The building took me many weeks of hard daily work. I made mistakes and had to start again several times. But slowly a real structure began to take shape, and I felt proud each time I looked at what I had built. I made walls from woven branches tied with long grass. I made a roof from large flat pieces of bark and leaves. I made a simple door from straight-tied branches. It was small and simple, but it was mine, and I loved it. I planted some of the seeds from the fruits I ate. I dug a small garden area near my stream in the forest. I did not know if the seeds would grow, but I tried, because hope is always worth the effort of planting. After several weeks, small green shoots appeared in my garden. I felt a happiness that was completely out of proportion to the small size of those tiny green plants in the dirt. But when you are alone, small victories feel enormous. I began to notice the island in a very deep way. I noticed which way the wind blew in different seasons. I noticed when the fish came closer to the shore to feed. I noticed the patterns of the clouds and what they meant. The island had its own rhythm just like a living thing. I became part of that rhythm over the long months. I stopped feeling like a stranger trapped on this island and began to feel like someone who belonged there. One day, in what I thought was my 5th month on the island, I saw something from the top of my hill that stopped my breath. Far on the horizon, there was a small, dark shape that moved. It was not a bird. It was not a cloud. It was a ship. My hands were shaking badly as I ran down the hill. I reached my signal fire and grabbed 2 stones together. My hands were so unsteady that the first sparks died quickly. I told myself to breathe and be calm and try again slowly. The second attempt caught. A small flame grew in the dry wood. I added more wood quickly and blew the flame gently upward. The fire grew and grew until it was burning strongly and high. A thick column of white and gray smoke rose into the clear sky. I stood at the top of the hill waving my arms wildly. I screamed even though I knew the sound could not reach that far. The ship continued on its path and my heart began to fall. Then it stopped. Then very slowly it began to turn. It was turning toward me. They had seen my smoke. I fell to my knees on the ground and covered my face with hands. I stayed like that for a long time, unable to do anything at all. I do not know if I was laughing or crying. I think it was both. A small boat was lowered from the ship and rowed toward my shore. 2 men jumped out and pulled the boat up onto the sand. They looked at me with surprise and then with great concern. I must have looked like a wild creature from the forest to them. One of the men walked toward me carefully and spoke slowly. He asked me in English if I was all right and what had happened. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out at first. It had been so long since I had spoken to another human being. Then the words came, slowly at first, and then all at once. I told them my name and the name of my ship and what had happened. The man put his hand on my shoulder and said they would help me. Those simple words were the most beautiful words I had ever heard. They brought me onto their ship and gave me food and fresh clothes. The captain was a kind woman named Maria who listened to my story. She told me that several months ago they had heard about the storm that destroyed the Silver Wind and that all crew were believed lost. My family had been told that I was gone and would not return. The thought of my mother hearing those words broke my heart completely. Captain Maria told me she would radio ahead so that my family could know that I was alive and that I was coming home to them very soon. That night, I stood at the front of the ship and watched the dark water. The same ocean that had taken everything from me was now carrying me home. I thought about all the things I had learned on that small island. I thought about how little we actually need to survive and be grateful. On the island, I had no phone and no computer and no entertainment at all. I had no comfortable bed and no warm shower and no easy food. But I had learned something that most people spend their whole lives searching for in all the wrong and comfortable places. I had learned that the human spirit is far stronger than we ever believe. I had learned that patience and hard work can solve almost any problem. I had learned that gratitude is not something you feel when life is easy. True gratitude is what you feel when you realize you are still alive. I had also learned that silence is not empty. Silence is full of things, full of your own thoughts and your own strength and your own voice. The island had given me the gift of knowing who I truly was, when there was no one else around to tell me or distract me. When the ship finally arrived at port after several days of sailing, there was a group of people waiting at the dock below. Among them, I saw two figures that made my vision blur with tears. My mother and my father were standing there side by side. My mother ran to me before I had even fully stepped off the ship. She held me so tightly that I could barely breathe at all. She said nothing for a long time. She just held me, and I held her back and felt something enormous release inside me. My father stood behind her, waiting with quiet and steady eyes. When my mother finally stepped back, my father put both hands on my face. He looked at me for a long time, the way you look at something precious, that you thought was gone forever, but has somehow come back to you. He said just 4 words to me softly and with great feeling. He said, "You came back, son." That was all. But the way he said those 4 words contained everything. Everything he had felt in all those long months I was gone. I returned to my small town and I stayed there for a while. I helped my father with his fishing and I helped my mother in her school. I walked on the beach every evening and looked at the water without fear. The ocean was still my home. It had just taught me a harder lesson. After several months, I began to write everything down in a journal. I wrote about every day on the island from the first to the last. I wrote about the fear and the loneliness and the hard work. I wrote about the moments of beauty and the small, quiet joys. That journal eventually became a book that I shared with the world. Many people wrote to me after reading it and said it had helped them. Some were going through very hard times in their own lives. They said the story reminded them that humans are stronger than they know, and that is the most important lesson I can leave you with today. You are stronger than you know. You are more capable than you believe. The difficult moments in your life are not punishments. They are the fire in which your true character is being formed. Every storm will end. Every night will become morning. Every island you feel trapped on has a shore you can build from. You just have to keep working and keep believing and keep going, one day at a time, one small victory at a time. After my book was published, I received a letter from a young man. His name was Daniel, and he was only 19 years old. He wrote that he had been feeling very lost and hopeless in his life. He said my story had given him the courage to keep trying. I wrote back to Daniel, and we became good friends over time. He eventually came to visit me in my small town by the sea. We sat on the beach together, and I told him more stories about the island and the lessons I had learned while I was there. Daniel told me about his own struggles with his family and his work. He said he often felt like he was on a lonely island of his own. Not an island in the ocean, but an island inside his own mind. A place of silence and confusion where he felt completely alone. I told him that I understood that feeling more than he knew. I told him that the most dangerous kind of loneliness is not the kind you feel on a desert island in the middle of the sea. It is the kind you feel in the middle of a crowded and noisy world. I told Daniel about the one rule I had learned on my island. Never stop working on something, even something very small, because the moment you stop working, you start to feel hopeless. And hope is kept alive by action, no matter how small that action is. Daniel listened to me very carefully that afternoon on the beach. He told me that he had been waiting for someone to give him permission to start over. I told him that no one can give you that permission. You have to give it to yourself. That is the whole point. A year later, Daniel wrote to me again with wonderful news. He had gone back to school and was studying something he loved. He was working part-time and saving money and feeling alive again. He said my words on that beach had stayed with him every single day. That letter meant more to me than anything my book had ever received, because helping one real person in their real daily life is worth more than 1,000 people who read your words and forget. We all have the power to change even one life with our story. I want to tell you something important before we end today. Your life is a story, and you are writing it every single day. Every choice you make is a sentence in that story. Every action you take is a paragraph in that story. Some days the story will feel exciting and full of adventure. Other days the story will feel dark and difficult and very slow, but every good story needs both kinds of days to be truly powerful. The hard chapters are what make the good chapters worth reading. When I was floating in that cold, dark ocean after the storm, I did not know that I was about to begin the most important chapter, the chapter that would shape everything I believed about myself, the chapter that would eventually give other people hope as well. Your hardest moment may also be the beginning of your most powerful chapter. Do not run from it. Do not hide from it and hope it goes away. Walk into it with your eyes open and your hands ready to work. The island is hard, but the island will also teach you who you are. I have now sailed many times since the day I was rescued. The ocean is still my greatest love and my deepest teacher. But I sail differently now than I did when I was 20 years old. I sail with respect and patience and with proper preparation. I check the weather carefully before I leave any port. I carry extra supplies and I always tell someone where I am going. I listen to the captain and the experienced sailors around me, and I never forget that the sea is always stronger than any boat. Life is very similar to the ocean in this way, I think. You must respect it and prepare for it and move with it carefully. You cannot control the storms, but you can control how you prepare. You cannot control what happens, but you can always control how you respond. That is the philosophy I have carried with me since the island. Not the philosophy of a great book or a famous university. The philosophy of a man alone on a beach with nothing but his hands, and his will, and his memory of his mother's voice saying, "Never give up." The island gave me everything I needed to understand this simple truth. We are all far more capable than we have been told or than we believe. The comfort of modern life is a gift, but it can also be a cage. We forget the power that lives inside us when things become too easy. My time on the island was not a punishment or a terrible mistake. It was the greatest education I ever received in my entire life. No classroom and no teacher and no book could have taught me what 43 days alone on a small green island in the ocean taught me. I learned to observe and to listen and to be patient. I learned to be grateful for small things like fire and fresh water. I learned that the human body is incredibly strong when it must be. I learned that the human mind is even stronger than the human body. And I learned that hope is not a feeling that comes and goes. Hope is a decision, a choice you make every single morning. You wake up and you choose to believe that today matters. You choose to believe that your actions today will lead somewhere good. Some mornings on that island, I did not want to get up at all. The loneliness was so heavy that my body felt like stone, but I got up anyway. Every single morning I got up and I worked, and every single day I built something that had not been there before. That is all any of us can do. Get up, work, build something, even when we are afraid, even when we are tired and uncertain, even when no one is watching and no one will applaud our effort. Build anyway. Because you are building yourself with every small action. I hope this story has given you something useful to carry today. I hope it has reminded you of the strength that is already inside you. I hope that when your own difficult days come, and they will come, you will remember Adam Cole and his small green island in the ocean, and you will remember that he came home, and so will you. Thank you with all my heart for listening today on English Avenue Bookish. This is the place where we grow our English and grow our minds together. Every story we share here is a gift we give to each other. Stay with us. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep growing. Keep going until our next story on English Avenue Bookish. Stay curious, stay kind, and stay strong.